With the surprising inflation drop-off and the stock market rally last week, another thing happened that suddenly made homes way cheaper in Raleigh and really everywhere in the country. If you're currently in the housing market or thinking about jumping in soon, you should definitely watch this video because there are steps you'll want to take to make sure you're able to reap the benefits of those recent changes before it's too late. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, housing affordability. I hear a lot of talk about home prices needing to take a dive because people think prices are currently not in line with people's budgets. I think it's very easy to get into an echo chamber of ourselves and the 100 or so people we surround ourselves with when forming opinions about affordability, but it's really important to look at the big picture to get an idea of how the majority of Americans are actually doing before making opinions about who can afford what and consequently fears about what's going to happen in the housing market. And we have access to this data. One of the most important metrics in determining whether home prices are in line with what the market can bear is the amount of disposable income that Americans have. If Americans are overburdened and can't pay for their basic cost of living, it might make sense that things would begin to unravel. Back in 2007, just before the last housing crash, household financial obligations were at the highest we'd ever seen and disposable income was at the lowest we'd ever seen. Where is it now? The answer might surprise you, and we're going to take a look at that. After we look at those numbers, what's happening in the Raleigh housing market might make a little more sense, so we'll get to that too. But first, let's jump into the Fed data. The first thing we're going to look at is the consumer debt service payments as a percent of a disposable income. This is the number that's gotten a lot of people buzzing because consumer debt is definitely on the upswing. It was getting to a pretty high peak back in 2019, and then of course it bottomed out during COVID when pandemic checks started hitting people's mailboxes and all the stores were closed, and now we're about back to the place we were in 2019. And if you look at that 10-year graph, consumer debt looks quite troubling, and it's true that levels are about where they were in 2008, but there's more to the story. Let's take a look at mortgage debt. This chart shows mortgage debt as a percentage of disposable income. If we look at the 1-year and 5-year views, you can see that mortgage debt is definitely increasing, but if we go back 10 years, you can see that relative to historic data, mortgage debt is very low. Remember, this is the monthly mortgage payments that we're looking at here. We're trying to understand how much money Americans have in their pockets after they pay their bills every month. Compared to 2012, Americans are looking pretty good, but if you go back even further, you can see that American debt service payments for their mortgage are lower than they have ever been before, and not just a little bit. This is astronomical. So the first question you might be asking is, how is it possible that mortgage debt is at historic lows if homes are so expensive? But if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. We're talking about the mortgage payment as a percent of the monthly disposable income, not the debt as a whole. Interest rates have been the lowest they've ever been in history over the course of the last few years, which made the payments really low. Many people who didn't buy a home over the last couple of years refinanced from 5-ish% rates down to 2 to 3% rates. I bought my previous home in 2012, and I think we paid somewhere near 4% interest, and it's currently refinanced down at 2.15. I'm not the only person. People were able to refinance and save hundreds of dollars a month. Lots of people's mortgage payments are very low compared to the disposable income. And remember, only 13% of homeowners bought their home during the pandemic boom. Most people are locked in at low prices and low rates. But we still need to look at one last graph to get the full picture. The household financial obligations as percent of disposable income takes into consideration all forms of financial obligations, including rent payments, auto leases, property taxes. It's really trying to give us a broad view of everything Americans have to pay for and what percentage of their income it's taking up. And look at this. It's the lowest in history. So even though consumer debt has ticked up a bit, mortgage debt and rental obligations are so low compared to income that it's really offsetting any consumer debt that could be putting a strain on the budget. I'm not saying there aren't individual Americans or even groups of Americans who are struggling with this inflation. Of course there are, but the data is very clear here. Most Americans are carrying much less debt burdens to disposable income ratio than any time in history. So now let's look at the Raleigh market to see what's happening here. We're going to look at a bunch of graphs, but let's look at the biggest news first. Take a look at this graph of new listings on the market. Again, people in the comments of my videos are often telling me that inventory levels are climbing, and I'm here to tell you that they're not, at least not in Raleigh at any significant amounts. Look at this. This is the lowest number of new homes listed to the market in the month of October in almost 10 years. Usually in October, we see somewhere around 4,000. So this, in 2020, there were 4,481 new listings. In 2021, we had 4,410. Let's go back to 2019. We had 4,100. 2018 in October, we had 3,692. 2017 in October, we had 3,612. This year, we only had 3,270 new listings hit the market. We are not getting the housing to the market that we need, and that's why the months of supply is not increasing, even though demand is dropping off. People are not selling their homes right now. Another objection I've heard in the comments are people saying that new housing starts are way up, and that's what's going to cause the housing crash. Once all these homes hit the market, when they're completed, inventory will skyrocket and prices will drop. Like most drastic claims, I'm not finding any evidence for it. This is a report from census.gov that shows housing starts and finished new construction by region. There's no data for Raleigh or even North Carolina, just some general numbers for the South, as if we're a monolith. So I don't know how this applies to North Carolina or Raleigh, but it's the closest we can get. Just FYI, a housing start is a key economic indicator, and it's defined as new construction home in which groundbreaking has begun. It is true that housing starts were high last year and completions are still up, but it's also true that builders are not starting new inventory. Builder starts are way down. When the market was hot, they were building. Now that it's cooled a bit, they've backed off. Here is the real evidence that builders are behaving differently from 2008. A few years ago, builders started listing their inventory in the MLS differently. I think it was 2018 or 2019 when builders started getting really concerned that the market had been hot for a long time and that it might start to slow down, and they wanted to avoid building houses if there wasn't going to be a buyer at the end of the construction. These builders had been through 2008. They were not playing that game again. So they negotiated with the Triangle MLS to change how we count the days on the market for new construction. It used to be that builders waited to put a home into the MLS until it was almost completed, so the days on the market would be lower. Days on the market is one of the key factors that buyer's agents use to determine how much negotiating room there is in a property, but builders wanted to start listing their homes before construction started, hoping to get a buyer for the house before they invested heavily in constructing it. But if they listed it before construction started, it would appear to have been sitting on the market for a long time by the time it was ready to sell. And so they said they would bear the brunt of heavier negotiations because their days on the market would be longer, even though there wasn't actually a house to buy when they listed it. And of course, that's reasonable. So TMLS changed it, and now all new construction homes show 0 days on market. The short of all that is not all homes in the MLS actually exist. Some listings are for houses that could be built, and it's a lot more than you would think. Now, look at this. When I go into the MLS and look for new construction, I do see some properties that are already completed listed for sale, but this kind of speculative building practically went the way of the dodo during the pandemic simply because builders couldn't get inventory out that quickly. They became accustomed to listing a lot in the MLS even before they pulled permits for the property, and we're still seeing that happen today. So right now we're looking at new construction in Wake County, so new construction, detached homes, single family, and we've got 836 homes. Now, when I go to the MLS, I see things like this. These are not all homes that exist. So like a lot of our market, it seems like there's 2,000 homes out there for sale right now, but really there's not, because a lot of these homes don't even exist. Representative photo, build your dream home to suit. Pre-sale opportunity, come build your dream home. These houses are not built yet. Best value in 2-story homes. I can't tell if this one's built or not. That's not a real picture, but that looks like pictures of the model. I would say that this probably is not built because it's not a real picture. Pre-sale opportunity, Weaver's Pond, not built yet. Pre-sale opportunity, first floor master suite in Zebulon. All photos are of a model home in another community. I don't know if this one's built yet. My guess is probably not, or they'd have real pictures of it. Home of the month special pricing, January, February 23 close. So it's not actually built all the way yet. I didn't have enough time to go through all 3,500 new construction homes currently listed, but you can see just from a sampling of random selections that it's pretty common for these listings to not exist. I looked at 20 randomly selected properties, and 11 of them had not been started yet. 11! There's simply lots for sale where new homes could be built. But goodness, think about this. What if half of those new construction listings are ghost listings that don't actually exist? What does that say about the 2 months of inventory we supposedly have for sale right now? New construction listings are about half of our inventory right now, half, and many of those don't actually exist. So no, I'm not buying the whole new house inventory surplus is going to tank the market argument. So there are two things I think are important that are happening in the Raleigh housing market right now. One, the The last few years in October, we typically have had around 4,000 homes come on the market. This October, we only had 3,200. Like I said before, it's the lowest absolute number of homes listed in October in 9 years. Supply is really not increasing here. Median home prices are seasonably down for outlying counties, but have started to tick back up in Wake and Orange counties, which both saw an increase in median price in the month of October. Raleigh is the county seat of Wake and Chapel Hill is the county seat of Orange County, for those of you who don't know. Let that sink in for just a minute. Home prices in Wake County edged up last month. It's supply and demand. Supply is not up, and there is enough demand to move the price needle higher in Raleigh. I know many people don't want to hear it, but the market looks good in Raleigh. If you have concerns about the market, please feel free to drop a link to any data or articles you've seen that concern you, and I'll take a look and either adjust my perception or share contextual information that'll broaden your perspective. Now let's look at even more good news. I am almost afraid to share good news because it's so bothersome to people and they get mad at me, which I don't care for, but I'm feeling kind of feisty, so I'm going to share it anyway. Even though it doesn't look like a housing crash is imminent, there are still some very big savings options out there for buyers because interest rates dropped by more than 0.5 percentage point at the end of last week. I actually just spoke with one of my preferred lenders and she told me it was 0.75%. What kind of rate drops have you seen since last week?
I've seen about a 0.75 of a drop in the rate.
Oh wow, that's a lot. That means if you're buying a $500,000 home, you could save $200 or more a month, depending on your credit score. Also, Fannie Mae predicts that interest rates could fall into the mid 4% range in 2023. If you're in the market now, you should call your lender and get your rate locked in case they jump back up. Because if there's anything that's been consistent about this market, it's how quickly it changes. Also, my lender let me know that they actually lock rates for 90 days when you're shopping for a house. You don't have to be under contract, or up to a year if you're looking for new construction. This really varies by lender, but I'll drop her information down in the comments if anybody needs a good lender.
Comparisons that some people are drawing to today to what we saw about 15 years ago.
Yeah, I would say it's night and day, right? 2006, 2007, you had a housing boom like we've never seen before. You saw very loose mortgage credit, and you saw really an abundant supply of homes on the market. Coming into this, housing supply was really quite tight. Credit criteria are extremely tight. The housing market is in relatively good shape. And again, the undersupply is a real critical factor here that is going to prevent home prices from really dropping the way we did see during the Great Financial Crisis. And I think it's also going to lead to a rebound as we get past this period of weakness and as mortgage rates return to more typical levels.
If you like this video, you might also like this one, where I also say the same thing that guy said.